Next up, we're going to hear from Darren's Shou. Darren's daughter is 4 years old. Alexa has been listening to her since she was born. So Alexa knows everything about her. Now imagine how much Alexa is going to know about her by the time she is 18. What impact will this accumulation of information have on the lives of our children? Broderick from BuzzFeed is leading this talk with Darren, who is the Vice President of Research for Symantec, and the Research Lead in Artificial Intelligence at Symantec, Aleatha Parker-Wood.
Hide this over here.
Hi, guys. Thank you all for being here. Before we get into this really interesting topic, we want to play a couple clips for you guys, right? So you have some media for us?
Let's throw the video up on the screen, and maybe we'll kick it off a little bit that way.
Are you a baby?
So this is my daughter.
Counting is 3, since essentially I became me.
So I think that's really interesting. She's saying, you know, are you a baby? And she's rhyming back about who she is.
Yeah. Who's your mommy?
I was made by a team of inventors.
So that obviously required me to explain a lot to her after that one.
Yeah.
Alexa, what do you think a giraffe is doing in the courtyard?
I don't know that one.
Alexa, how do you know that you don't know that?
So this is your daughter.
Yes, this is my daughter.
She's 4 years old.
Yes.
And she seems to have emotionally imprinted on an AI. Is that fair to say?
I think that she's, you know, if you back it up for a little bit, so I'm in technology, and I always have everything from the watch to the phones. I'm sure you all have it. And so I had one of these listening assistants in her playroom growing up. So she, for the past 4 years, has had one in her playroom and in other places around the house for a long time. She's grown up with it. She's 4, and as you heard, Alexa says she's 3.
Right.
Interesting time to grow up together.
And so how often are these sort of existential interactions with Alexa happening in your house?
Yeah, all day, right? So, and there's such an insight into my daughter or into her friends that come over. That was something, and you know, look, if you think about it, why are we doing this talk? What happened was, you know, my daughter's been growing up with this, and I pulled out the app one day, and I realized it had a recording of everything that she's ever said in that room since she was born.
That is somehow even more embarrassing than old baby photos that your parents might show.
Yeah.
Is an audio recording of your entire life.
Actually, what's worse is it's not just I have my baby photos, it's Amazon has her baby photos, Google has her baby photos.
That's
so it's
right.
a little bit more creepy.
So let's go into that a little bit. I mean, what does this mean to have a child interacting essentially with a brand from like the beginning of their life? What do you think that would do to somebody kind of living in this next generation?
Do you want to take the optimistic view?
Yep.
I'd like to be the optimistic view on it. You know, it's interesting because my nephews that are now teenagers, they grew up with brands that you would imagine, fast food, retail organizations. But my daughter's growing up with tech and media brands, and that's really fascinating. But she's not having to anthropomorphize them. She thinks that it's some kind of sentient entity. She talks about it. Where's your body? Who's your mommy? How are you feeling? It's interesting that she's asking these questions over there, and I think what that's creating, honestly, it's as if she has an AI sibling.
So let's hear maybe a less optimistic idea. You know, what do you think about the term AI sibling? I mean,
I think siblings are fantastic, but at least, I don't know about your siblings, but my siblings don't then try to sell me stuff 10 years down the road. So what's a little unnerving for me is that Amazon knows everything about what you like, what you enjoy, what you're excited about, what you're scared of. And that's not a problem now when you're 3, but when your kid is 13 buying things online, how's that going to be used?
so let's move up the timeline a little bit. If we kind of take this idea of the next generation being an AI-raised partially generation. What would someone at 13, what would their life look like having, AI-based toys and home assistants in their life for that long?
So maybe I'm gonna show you guys something. I didn't just bring this up on stage just because I like carrying a bag around, but so this is another assistant. We don't. This is one that I found online and that I had in her room for a while, and it's powered by IBM Watson. And so going from 3 and 2, using something like this is really interesting, I think. And then when you're 13, remember that one of the key differences about this AI generation, the first generation to really grow up 0 to N years, is that it's following them forever, right? Remember the back end of this, the body will change. It may start out as this, but then it's going to be in a phone, and then it's going to be in a wearable, and then it's going to be in the car or the home. And so if you think about it, there's the potential for immortality and for it to follow you until you're 13. So now your twin is now your AI best friend forever.
And on the flip side, do you think that might change the way, teenagers socialize? If they've got this thing with them that, follow their best friend, it's with them, would that make socialization harder, you think?
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting question. I mean, on the good end, you can imagine that it's kind of like this social security blanket. It's the one that always listens to you, that's always comforting. But then, are you building up the kinds of social skills that you need to function through your adolescence? Are you finding it more difficult to interact with other human beings because you have this crutch that you can rely on to comfort you?
I mean, I was awkward enough at 13 without a superpowered robot in my pocket. I can't imagine what it would be like now.
Well, it has the power, though, to be an amazing influence on your life. It can be a coach, a best friend, a confidant, a therapist, someone who wakes you up in the morning and says, you look fantastic today. You're going to have a great day. Remember that one thing you did last week that was so amazing? I hope that happens to you again. Or it could go a different way.
Or it could say, do you remember that really embarrassing thing you did last week? We've got a product to help you with that. You are never going to make that mistake again.
Right, a product.
There's anecdotes like that already happening. Like there was the story of the teenage girl who didn't know she was pregnant until Target figured it out by accident, because we're talking about the AI sort of helping you, but as they get smarter and they move from that, we could look at a world where the AI is telling you, next week, you're going to get sick and have to miss school, or 2 weeks from now you're gonna get a pimple because you keep touching your face.
Like the comment you just made, right? One of the things that could be really interesting about this is, what if you happen to be the child of a prominent politician? What if during this life it has learned all about your politics and it knows who you are and your identity? But let's say that is in the control of someone who wants you to vote for the other politician. What if it starts interacting with you as you're 13 or 18 years old, and it's subtly nudging you to believe in certain ideologies, and maybe that's even against that of your parents? What is the responsibility of something like this here?
What would Alexa think about my emo phase? I don't know. Would it be supportive? Would it try to sell me new Vans? I'm not sure. So if you've sunk 13 years of your life into this AI system, it's learning about you. What is that going to look like, as you're leaving your 20s? In your late 20s, you've had almost 3 decades of AI following you, watching you, helping you. What is that adult going to look like?
I mean, in the best possible case, it's going to be your coach. It's going to help you through your interactions. It's going to say, hey, that was a great talk you gave last week at Web Summit, but let me give you some pointers for next time.
I think on the opposite side, though, what could happen would be, let's say, as you're applying to college, university, maybe a job, something that wants to know about your character, your aptitude, and your capabilities. What if it has a recording, a record of, evidentiary proof that you've done something bad? Maybe you said something that was hateful. Maybe you said something that was bigoted. What if that never goes away? What if every choice you had is recorded? And remember that the thing about this, and why it's really important to think about the children that are growing up and beta testing AI, really, is their brains are still developing. They're still in a phase of neuroconstruction. They should be allowed to make mistakes and experiment with thoughts without the same kind of legal punishments we would impose on someone of the age of consent.
So, a 30-year-old, how do they separate themselves from 30 years of their own data? Do we need new laws for this sort of thing?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that we've talked about between us is this idea of a right to be forgiven. The mistakes that you make at 13 shouldn't be something that follow you around until you're 30 or 40. I think also, in some cases, it will normalize some things. You know, everybody struggles with depression, but when you have everybody's data saying that this is a normal phase that everybody goes through, it happens, I think that's actually very powerful to have that aggregated data.
If I may add to that, I think that if we talk about the right to be forgotten, okay, and we understand now more about what that right means to us as we interact increasingly with the digital world, Aleatha has now brought up this great concept of the act of maybe the right to be forgiven, which I think relates, and maybe forgiveness starts with also having some things being forgotten, right? To forgive, to forget. But what about, I think, and maybe just to put a fine point on it, what is our right to a second chance? If you have something that can live forever, whether it's a dinosaur or a phone, remember that thing is immortal. It will outlive us multi-generationally. It's omniscient in a way, not to put, I'm abstracting there. It's everywhere, right? And it will follow you through your life and through the lives of your children afterwards. I just wonder if it could, if not thought about, preclude our ability to have second chances, which I think makes us very human.
Well, so let's finish the timeline here. Let's move up. Let's say you're in your 70s, your 80s, and you're kind of wrapping things up. But the AI obviously isn't. The AI is the same age that it was when it met you at 3, but it's got 70 years of information about you. What happens to the information? Does Amazon rebuild me as a machine and then have me sell shoes? Or what happens to that?
Would you like to go first?
I think that you can imagine it being the arbiter of your personality. As you get into senescence, it can say things like, oh, you seem to be undergoing some changes, you seem to be forgetting things, So that kind of early monitoring is actually incredibly powerful. I think
like
that's
a guardian angel.
Yeah, like a guardian angel
Someone
that watches
protect
over you. Yeah.
Who knows you that well.
Mm-hmm. But then it's also the guardian of my legacy. I think about things like reading my grandmother's chest of letters. We have such a better record of our lives to pass on to our children. And hopefully
a more visceral one.
A much more visceral one.
I mean, think about it. There's recordings of my daughter before she could speak, which was really funny because she would say Alexa a lot, which is super cute. But 70 years, 100 years of data. And remember, AI and machine learning, Aleatha's more of the expert on AI than I am here, but AI feeds on data. It gets better generally the more data that you feed it. 100 years of data, I'm not sure that everybody's thinking about what 100 years of data is. What if she passes that on to her grandchildren? Right. What if I pass mine on to my 5 generations from now? I'm passing 300 years of data on. There's some benefits with that.
There is, and I'm thinking about, people that I have a lot of respect for. I would love to see some people, put their data in the public domain and make it accessible. As a biographical
that
memorial,
reminds me,
can you imagine
people
being able to look at...
Scientists say, I'm going to donate my brain to science.
Yeah, but I'm going to donate
my body.
my life, my entire digital record to science.
But do we need to start thinking about protections for that? Because you're dead. You can't really get the data back at that point. So do we need to figure out in your will? Do you have to say, I want to be de-indexed from Google?
I want the right to be digitally dead. I'm not sure if I've made my choice on that yet, but I'd like the ability to at least consider the fact that maybe I don't want all my journals read or all my recordings to survive for all time, or maybe I just don't want them to survive in the hands of a third party or a brand for all time, because I'm just not sure how that will be used. What is my right to my likeness, to my thoughts? Am I allowed to specify that they should be forgotten?
You can ask for a do not resuscitate order, but there's no digital equivalent.
That's a
great way to think about it.
I feel like we've gone very far into the future. It's very complicated. I want to sort of wrap things up by coming right back to the present. And what do you think, for both of you guys, for children who are interacting with AI in this first wave, what needs to immediately start to change about how we talk about this? What can parents out there do to help their children navigate this world?
One of the things that I'd love to see is much stronger advocacy for privacy protections. I think there's some amazing privacy technologies coming down the road that make it possible to do machine learning in a private fashion so that you're not giving your child's data away to every advertiser on the planet. I would love to see more advocacy for those kinds of protections for children.
I couldn't agree more. I think we need so much of what we do. And I challenge you guys to look around and go through the pavilions, and you'll see that there's a lot of people out there, really well-intentioned and really wonderful things, probably many of you in the audience, who are making smart things smarter. That's great. I want to also make sure that we're making smart things safer, and that we're thinking about that over a time frame that is really not just about us, but about our children, our children's children. So let's bring it back to advocating for multi-generational safety before we just use the technologies. Right? And that's why I would call it like an AI generation of beta testers. Do we feel comfortable with that?
And in a lot of ways, when we create any form of artificial intelligence, it's impacted by the society that it's made in. So I feel like we are sort of hitting a point now where if we don't fix some of these larger issues, maybe, we're going to automate them.
Yeah, and look, maybe it's because we come from the company that we're at, but if you think about it with one lens on it, the first artificial life form created by man in our view was actually in the digital world was what? It was a virus. Many good uses of digital technology were happening, but the first one that self-propagated and moved around was a virus. So this is where I think it shaped our world in thinking about that safety, right? And I just want to kind of underscore that point.
Yeah, I think that's great. And the other thing that I think about, you're right, we have a very privileged position. We're sitting up here coming from a country with great protections, but I don't know what's going to happen to my data as it goes through its life. I don't know what jurisdictions it's going to pass through.
Yes.
And so I would love to know, I would love the right to not be surprised. Let me put it that way.
And if I could just add one last thing on that, because I think it's a great point. Right not to be surprised is exactly it. I want to make sure that I am not challenging my child's future by not building up that body of data that will make her a superstar at work and school someday. But I also want some control over, if I don't think that's going well in 20 years, how do I opt out?
How do you walk it back?
We could all just move to a shack in the woods.
Batteries out.
Yeah. Well, I feel like this has been a very, very doom and gloom, but I do want to end on a nice note, which is like, as a father of someone going through this, what's been your favorite funny moment of having an AI, in the house?
I think one of the most interesting conversations I've had with my daughter came up recently. I was asking her what she understood about Siri. I was prepping for this talk, and she said, Siri is everywhere. Siri can be a boy or a girl. Siri lives in the digital universe. And I was like, you've just reinvented an omnipresent, omniscient AI.
Well, look, I can't top that because that is awesome. What a great lesson. But my favorite thing is it has my calendar. And so my daughter in the recording says, when is daddy done with work? And it will say 5 o'clock, and I'm like, she knows. I'm done. We're going to go playtime and have a dance party.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been super fascinating. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ryan.